The river sang its gentle lullaby as it passed the village of Odam, curling like a silver ribbon through tall grass and thick mangroves. Its waters, sacred and life-giving, carried stories from the mountains to the sea, stories the villagers had long learned to listen to. Among them was Mokoni, the healer, who had listened to the river his whole life. Mokoni was a man carved by grief and time. His wife had passed many seasons ago, taken by the river fever, leaving him with only their daughter, Leo. The villagers called Leo the Whisper Leaf, for she moved through life as the wind does through trees, gentle, unseen, yet always felt. She sang to the plants she tended, and they thrived under her touch. The animals lingered near her garden. Even the spirits of the wood watched her with quiet reverence. But even harmony, like ripe fruit, carries the seed of change. One day, as the village prepared for the moon festival, Mokoni returned from his herbal pilgrimage not alone, but with a woman swathed in crimson robes. Her skin shimmered like dusk, and her eyes were the color of smoke. She called herself Adoya, and said she came from the Red Grove, the distant place whispered of in stories, where the trees bled sap as red as fire. With Adoya came her daughter, Kosaira. Where Leo was soft-spoken and open-hearted, Kosaira wore her pride like a crown. She held her chin high and spoke to others as if they stood beneath her. She was beautiful, yes, but there was something sharp in her beauty, like glass underwater. Mokoni, his voice steadied by a hopeful smile, told the villagers he had wed Adoya in a sacred grove under the light of 3 moons. He asked for their blessing. Some nodded politely. Others turned away. No one remembered the Red Grove ever sending people here. Still, Leo welcomed Adoya and Kosaira with kindness, offering them space in her mother's old room. She prepared their bedding with lavender leaves and sang her mother's song to cleanse the air. But when she opened the door the next morning, the lavender had turned black and brittle, and the air carried a heaviness that made her heart ache. Then, stranger things began to happen. Birdsong near the house ceased. The goats refused to drink from the basin behind their hut. A pot of milk curdled moments after being set down. Children passing by whispered of shadows with no source, and the village dog snarled when Kosaira walked past. Adoya, for her part, seemed to drift through these happenings untouched, like mist through the forest. She spoke little but watched much, her gaze settling longest on the river. It wasn't long before the elders began to murmur. They remembered old tales of the Red Grove, a place not of trees, but of blood rites and forgotten gods. Some said the grove was swallowed by the earth long ago for its defiance of the river's covenant. But Mokoni, blind to the signs, smiled as though he had found peace again. She soothes the ache in my bones, he told Leo one night, sipping fermented honey beneath the stars. And don't you see? We are no longer alone. Leo tried to smile, but she had begun to dream. And the dreams unsettled her. She saw a great serpent coiled beneath the river, its eyes glowing like lanterns in a storm. Around its crownless head hung bones, child bones, bird bones, some too old to name. It did not hiss or strike. It whispered. Leo, it called, child of silence, bearer of promise. You must pay the debt. The dreams came again and again, each time more vivid. Then, one night, as the cicadas fell silent and the moon turned crimson, a knock came at their door. It was Ojiku, the village elder whose skin was lined with the map of 100 seasons. His eyes held storms. He did not ask to come in, he stepped inside like he belonged there. He placed a small patch of river stones at Leo's feet and said only, "The river speaks of a debt unpaid, and the scaled one stirs." When Mokoni tried to protest, Ojiku raised his hand and looked only at Leo. "You feel it. In your dreams. In your bones." The grove did not die. It simply moved. Adoya emerged from the shadows behind them, and though her face smiled, her eyes did not. That night, the wind did not blow. The frogs did not sing. And the river, once a lullaby, fell silent. Leo rose with the sun as she always had, but the peace of her days had withered like leaves in drought. Her hands, once tender from harvesting herbs and weaving flower crowns for the village children, were now calloused and sore from endless tasks. From the moment the rooster crowed to the hush of nightfall, Adoya kept her moving, scrubbing, fetching, grinding roots until her arms trembled and her knees buckled. "You are young," Adoya would sneer with a twisted smile, reclining beneath the shade while Kosara soaked her feet in warm milk. "And it is good for the young to serve." Kosara, draped in fine cloth and oils gifted by her mother, never lifted a finger. She looked upon Leo with a mixture of disdain and amusement, as if watching a pet perform tricks. Leo bore it without protest. Not out of weakness, but because she sensed something darker beneath it all, like a drumbeat under still water. Mokani, her once radiant father, now walked in slow shuffles. His shoulders slumped and his eyes, once full of wisdom and mirth, had turned dim and far away, as if his spirit had been wrapped in fog. She tried to speak to him one evening, slipping him ginger tea under the old mango tree. "Boba, you look unwell," she whispered. He blinked at her, the tea untouched. "Your mother says it is the weather." "The heat weighs on me, child. Nothing more." But it was not the heat. Leo had seen Adoya stirring bitter-smelling oils into his meals, had watched her press a thumb to his forehead while muttering in a language no one in Odam spoke. She had even found strange bone charms buried near his pillow. Leo's unease grew heavier when she began to notice Adoya slipping away in the dead of night. Always barefoot. Always silent. One night, driven by a force she couldn't name, Leo followed. The moon hung low and red, casting long shadows across the path as Leo crept behind her stepmother, careful not to snap any twigs underfoot. Adoya moved like smoke through the trees, unbothered by thorns or branches, until she reached the old baobab shrine. The shrine had once been a sacred place, where ancestors were honored and offerings laid for the river spirits. But it had been long abandoned after the last priestess vanished beneath the roots during a storm no one could explain. Now, moss clung to the stones, and vines strangled the carved totems. The tree itself towered above, its branches clawing the stars. Adoya knelt before the shrine and began to chant. Her voice rose and fell in a rhythm that didn't belong to this world. Leo watched in silence, the hairs on her arms rising. The air turned thick. The soil trembled slightly beneath her feet. A lightless crack opened in the roots, and from it, a voice slithered out, too low for human ears, yet it filled Leo's head. "You return with empty hands, Adoya." Adoya bowed low, her voice quivering. "Kosara was to be the offering. But you turned her away. Tainted. Her soul bears too many shadows. I asked for light, not echoes." "I have found another," Adoya whispered, her fingers digging into the dirt. "The healer's daughter. She is untouched. The spirits adore her. Her blood sings." There was silence, and then a sound like scales brushing stone. "Bring her to me. At the turning of the moon. When the light is eaten, I will accept her. And you shall have all you were promised, power, beauty, gold without end. But fail me again, and your bones will line my hollow." The roots sealed again as if nothing had happened. Adoya exhaled and smiled, cruel and triumphant. Leo ran before she could be noticed, her breath shaking, her heart pounding against her chest like a frightened bird. She didn't stop until she reached the riverbank, where the water still reflected stars too tired to shine. That night, Leo could not sleep. The serpent came again in her dreams, its eyes pools of ancient knowing. It wore its crown of bones with pride. "You are the flame in the dark," it whispered. "And I will not be denied." The days that followed grew stranger still. Adoya began dressing Leo in red silks and rubbing perfumed oils into her skin. "You are becoming a woman now," she said, voice as sweet as rotten fruit. "And you must be made ready. You are special, child." Kosara watched from the doorway, her eyes filled not with jealousy, but fear. Mokani, too weak to rise from bed, only mumbled in his sleep. He called for Leo's mother. He called for help. But Leo had no one to turn to. The eclipse moon approached, a dark omen carved into the calendar of the sky. And deep within her, Leo knew, if she did not act, she would be swallowed, by roots, by serpent, by darkness older than names. Leo woke with a gasp. Her skin burned as if kissed by fire, though the morning air was cool and still. When she rolled up her sleeve, she saw it, fine, glowing etchings coiling along her forearm like threads of living silver. The markings pulsed softly beneath her skin, a script no human hand had written. She traced them with shaking fingers. More appeared each morning after dreams where the serpents whispered riddles and called her bride. By the third day, the marks had crept to her collarbone, delicate and terrifying. The villagers might have thought them scars from some strange vine or bite, but deep down, Leo knew, this was not of the earth. She was being claimed. It was on the fourth night that Ojiku came again. The ancient elder stepped from the shadows of a fig tree, his cane carved with feathered serpents, his eyes cloudy but unblinking. The wind seemed to hush around him. "You are marked," he said, sitting beside her on the riverbank. "The bright sign. It binds you to the scaled one." Leo clenched her fist. "I didn't choose this." "No. You were chosen. But choice remains." He tapped his cane once against the earth. "The mark is not just a brand, it is a test. Few have borne it and lived. But the river mother watches. There is still a path." He told her of the 3 trials, ancient rites of spirit and truth that could cleanse the mark and break the pact before the eclipse moon. "Where?" she asked. "Where do I go?" "To the cave of echoes, beyond the thorns of Goni. The river mother waits." That night, Leo returned home in silence, only to find her soup waiting. Adoya watched too closely as she sipped. The broth was bitter. Too bitter. Her throat began to seize. The bowl shattered on the floor as Leo dropped it. She ran. Branches whipped her face. Roots grasped at her ankles. But the wind itself seemed to carry her steps, and the eyes of beast glowed with strange understanding. A silver fox darted ahead as if guiding her. An owl flew above, circling each turn in the trail. The spirits of the wild had chosen her, too. Behind her, Adoya screamed curses to the night. Kosara stood beside her, uncertain and shaken. The journey was cruel. She crossed the marsh of whispering flies, climbed the span rocks where the wind howled names of the dead, and bled her feet raw on the thorns of Goni. Days bled into nights without sleep. She walked guided only by dreams and the soft glow of the marks. Then, finally, she reached the cave of echoes. It rose like a jagged mouth from the earth, its stone teeth veined with blue quartz. Inside, the air shimmered like heat above a flame. The river flowed upward here, reversing time and sound. Her voice echoed before she spoke. And then it came. A hum. Low. Ancient. Full of sorrow and strength. The river mother appeared, not as a woman, but as water in motion. Her face was carved from moonlight and memory. "You seek to break the serpent's claim," she said, rippling with every word. "Then begin." Leo was pulled into the trial of reflection. She stood alone on a mirror of water that stretched to infinity. There were no stars, no earth, no end, only her own reflection looking back. But then, it changed. The reflection twisted into doubt. "You are weak," it said. "No one will come for you. Mokani is lost. You have no power. The serpent will take you, and they will forget your name." Then, the serpent's voice slithered through her mind, "You cannot win. Why suffer? Accept me. I will make you more than they ever let you be. You will never be helpless again." Tears spilled from Leo's eyes. Her knees buckled. But she remembered her mother's lullaby, had forgotten about the strength in soft things. About how rivers carve stone not with rage, but with patience. She stood. My spirit is mine, she whispered. The reflection shattered. The trial was past. From the still water rose a small talisman, shaped like a drop of river glass, clear as truth, strong as faith. It paused once, and the first mark on her arm faded. Lael emerged from the cave, her hands trembling but her heart steadier than ever. But far behind her, in a grove where shadows crawled, Adoya's rage was seething. She lives, she hissed. The little flame defies me. Kosara stood by her mother's side, her eyes dark but hesitant. Adoya called upon old Pax. 3 spirit wolves, fur like ash, eyes like coals, rose from the earth at her feet. Their growls shattered leaves from trees. Bring her back, Adoya ordered. Alive, but not untouched. The eclipse moon was nearing. The serpent stirred. And Lael's journey had only just begun. The wind carried ash and petals as Lael walked deeper into the spirit lands. The cave of echoes faded behind her, and ahead stretched a grove where nothing bloomed, where time itself seemed to sleep. Her river glass talisman hung around her neck, warm with the river mother's blessing. She had passed the first trial. But the marks on her body glowed brighter now, flaring with urgency. 2 trials remained. A whisper guided her, a voice like cracked reeds and gentle rain. Sacrifice. Lael stepped into a stone glade shaped like a bow. In its center stood a single, flickering lantern. Faces danced in its glow, smiling, lost, familiar. One face stopped her breath. Mokani. He stood by the flame, holding her old reed doll, humming the song he used to sing when storms frightened her. He did not see her, but he was real. This is not him, she told herself. But her legs shook. A voice echoed, to pass, you must leave behind the memory that holds you. The trap is not made of chains, it is made of longing. A spirit trap. She fell to her knees. Her father's image grew clearer, warm and alive. He reached for her with kind eyes and said her name. She wept, but she reached for the talisman. I love you, she whispered, but I must go forward. The image of Mokani began to fade. The lantern dimmed. Her tears vanished into smoke, and so did her father's memory. The song was gone. Forever. She had passed the trial of sacrifice. The final path led into a hollowed hill, where the air pulsed with the rhythm of her heartbeat. Inside, it waited. A self. But not quite. This version of Lael stood straighter, smiled cruelly, and had golden serpents coiled in her braids. Her eyes burned like twin suns. I am what you'd be if you gave in, the doppelganger said. To power. To rage. To vengeance. Then she attacked. The battle was brutal. Every move Lael made, her shadow matched. River clashed against fire. Blade against blade. The serpent's voice whispered in both their ears, only one of you may live. Blood fell. But in a final cry of defiance, Lael used the river glass to shatter the illusion in her twin's heart. Her doppelganger faltered. Lael plunged the blade into her own shadow's chest. The false Lael disintegrated into stardust. The trial of blood was complete. The river mother appeared once more in a great surge of light and mist, rising from the stream beneath the hill. You have walked through pain and shadow, she said, and not let it shape you into stone. She placed her watery palm over Lael's heart. Flames danced across her fingertips. In you, fire and water dwell in peace. Take this gift, child of earth. A torrent of power rushed through Lael's veins, she felt the river answer her thoughts, and sparks flicker across her skin. For a heartbeat, she was one with all things. Then, the river mother faded. And the eclipse moon had begun to rise. Lael ran. She reached Odam just as the sky turned black and gold, and the sun was swallowed in a circle of fire. The villagers had gathered in the square, garlanded in flowers and silks, their eyes glazed. A pavilion stood in the center, draped in crimson and bone. At its heart sat the bridegroom, tall, draped in shimmering robes, crowned in gold. His face was hidden behind a carved ivory mask. To all others, he looked like a noble prince. But to Leo's eyes, now sharpened by truth and trial, he was a horror, a serpent of scales and shadow, coiled on a throne of skulls. His forked tongue flickered, and his eyes were pits of endless hunger. Adoya stood by, cloaked in red, smiling with triumph. Kosairo watched with unreadable eyes. The villagers, entranced, cheered. And Leil, dressed in tattered robes and dust, stepped into the square. No one saw her until she raised her hand. With a shout, she slammed her palm to the earth. Water surged upward like a wave from the wells, and fire bloomed in a ring around her. Her voice echoed with the River Mother's strength. Awaken! Light blasted across the square. The Serpent Prince shrieked. The illusions shattered like glass. The villagers screamed as the truth tore free. The prince melted into his true form, monstrous and crowned in bone. A gasp rippled as Adoya's spell was undone. Mothers clutched children. Elders trembled. The world cracked open around them. And at the center of it all stood Leil. No longer the obedient daughter. No longer the sacrifice. She was flame and river, scarred and sacred. And she had returned to end it. The sky cracked open as the last of Adoya's illusions died. Villagers fled from the square, screaming as the scaled one revealed his true form, taller than any man, draped in coils of shimmering obsidian, crowned in bone and horn. His eyes were pits of hunger, his forked tongue dripping venom that scorched the stones where it fell. Leil stood firm, her riverglass talisman glowing white-hot against her chest. You were never meant to enter our world, she called, the River Mother's voice threading through her own. But Adoya was not done. Mad with desperation, she dragged Kosairo forward. Take her. She's young, strong, purer than before, she cried, forcing the trembling girl toward the altar. The serpent sniffed, hissed. Impure still. Touched by your greed. He recoiled from Kosairo like wrath. Adoya shrieked and struck her daughter, eyes blazing with fury. Then take me, Adoya spat, but give me the power you promised. The serpent's eyes narrowed. Then he struck. Fangs wider than spears drove into Adoya's chest. She screamed, but it was not pain that echoed. It was regret. The coils closed around her, and in a moment, the woman who once called herself a mother was no more. Only silence remained. The serpent turned toward Leil. You carry her scent, it hissed. Bride. Flame. Vessel. You belong to me. It lunged. But Leil did not run. She raised the talisman and called out. River Mother, lend me your voice. A storm of light exploded from her chest. Water spiraled from the broken fountains, forming shields and blades around her. Fire danced at her fingertips, not wild but controlled, the harmony of flame and flow. The serpent circled, striking with tales and illusions. Each vision, of her mother dying, of her father turning away, of herself alone, was met with defiance. She fought through grief. Through fear. Through doubt. The battle raged, shaking the earth. Then came a sudden stillness. From the smoke emerged Ojiku, walking as if through fog. He bore no weapon, only a staff carved with ancient sigils. You are not alone, child, he said. You never were. He struck the ground. The spirit world shimmered, and in that space, Leil saw the truth. Ojiku was not merely an elder, but a guardian of the veil. A spirit guide. A memory from before memory. End it, guardian, he whispered. Leo channeled every drop of her strength into the river glass, now glowing like a second sun. Scaled one, she said, you were never master. You were only a shadow of desire. She drove the talisman into the earth. Vines and flames surged upward, binding the serpent. Its body thrashed, its voice shrieked with rage. But Leo spoke the river mother's name, not as a plea, but as a command. The earth opened. The serpent howled one final time before being dragged downward, sealed in a sacred stone prison carved with the marks of truth. When silence fell, it was clean. Dawn broke. The villagers emerged, dazed but free. Children wept into their mothers' robes. Elders held each other, whispering blessings. Mokani, once sick and hunched, stood upright. His eyes were clear, his breath strong. He took Leo's hands in his, and for the first time in moons, he smiled. You saved us, my daughter, he said. And more than that, you remembered who we are. In the days that followed, the Baobab shrine was restored, its roots washed clean by rain and song. Kosaira, humbled and broken, asked for forgiveness and chose to live in service to the shrine, tending the sacred grounds in silence. Leo was named keeper of the grove, guardian of the spirit gate. Elders and children alike came to her not only for healing but for wisdom. She wore no crown, but the people called her Queen of the Waters. Ojiku vanished with the wind, leaving only footprints by the river's edge. And the Red Grove legend faded, but the spirit of truth, of fire and river, lived on in Leo's name.